Hi, I'm Jen, a climate scientist turned storyteller and climate campaigner. And this is the first truth-telling story that I'm going to share with you. It is my Roe v. Wade truth-telling story. It's deeply personal and maybe triggering for some, but I'm sharing it because I care. I'm sharing it because I'm part of the climate movement, fighting for a future in which we can all thrive. And something I've learned on my journey from climate scientist to storyteller and climate campaigner is that while we must listen to the science, we cannot take adequate action until we come together and unite in solidarity to upcycle this system we are stuck in. A system that is so damaging to each and every one of us. A system that is threatening the survival of our species. A system that is destroying the beautiful planet we all call home. And a system that is steeped in patriarchy. And so if sharing my experiences helps bring awareness to the reality of how damaging this patriarchal system is, if it helps us in some way unravel that system, then it's worth it. So here goes. I'm going to share 4 very personal examples of my experiences of how patriarchy in our society has hurt me, and the lessons that can be taken from these. But first, I actually need to apologise to my loved ones who are only just learning these deeply personal stories for the first time here. I'm sorry that the way that social conditioning works meant that I didn't feel able that, or I could talk about it at the time and let you support me through these difficult experiences. So yeah, here goes. There's, in chronological order, I guess, 4 examples of why I should say that I'm coming with this because seeing so much about the Roe v. Wade being overturned, and it's just one of a whole long list of our rights that are being stripped away from us, and that is scary, and something to fight back against. And if truth telling and sharing stories is a way of doing that, then absolutely worth it. So here goes. The first experience was when I was 16. I started working for arguably the most famous coffee chain in the world. I was working to save money so that I could fulfill my dream to travel the world. I was 16 and my manager abused his power. It started with a bit of sexually themed banter, turned into sexual harassment, and ultimately led to him taking my virginity in a pretty unpleasant way. As young girls, society tells us to stay pure, to save yourself for the right person, and that losing your virginity should be something special. Well, he took that from me. And while I ignored the emotional side of this abuse of power at the time, it did hurt me in so many ways. And that social conditioning also meant that I didn't feel like I could say anything. I let it escalate from a joke. I should have stopped it. I'm not sure how a 16-year-old could have, and I'd have risked my job and my dreams to travel in doing so. So instead, I let it go, let it escalate. But I also found strength in not letting this horrible person stop me in pursuing my life and my dreams. The second experience came as a silly mistake in 2015. I had a short-lived bit of fun with a guy who never stopped to ask me about protection, because apparently that's only the girl's responsibility. And I was too shy and lacking confidence to stop what was happening in the heat of the moment. And I also thought that it's okay, like I can deal with it later, whether it's with emergency contraception. But the next thing you know, I'm pregnant. I was too ashamed to tell anyone, apart from my friend who picked us up after the abortion from the hospital. And so, yeah, again, suppressed the emotional side of that, and sought refuge and respite from it, in the sense that I made the right decision for me at that time. And I am so grateful that that option was available to me. And I'm so angry. And one of the reasons that I've been inspired to take this step and share these stories in this truth telling is because I'm so angry to see that opportunity, that right to make the right decision for you and your life is being stripped away from so many people. Yeah, the reason that I made that decision was because I had my dream job ahead of me. I had field work in Antarctica, which was a lifelong dream come true. And I was not emotionally or financially ready to raise a child. And besides that, the guy couldn't even respond to a text message. He didn't care in the slightest. So yeah, I made the right decision. It was my body, my life, my choice. And so, although in this example, yes, I was foolish to put myself in that situation. I was aware of the risk. Um, and some of you may not agree with the decision that I made, but I want to bring it back to highlighting this issue of patriarchy within our society, because whilst I was foolish on this occasion, whilst you may not agree with my decision, let's just flip this around a second. Where's the responsibility on the guy's part to have asked or checked in the first place? Where is the responsibility to, even just acknowledge somebody that you've spent time with and slept with? That in itself is a really rude and disrespectful attitude to have towards sex and relationships. I'm sure that it goes both ways. I'm sure that there are likely girls that have treated guys in that same way. But yeah, I was not even in a position. This guy didn't care for his role or responsibility in the whole situation. And as I say, for so many reasons, I had my full life ahead of me, so many brilliant opportunities, and I was not financially or emotionally ready to have that all turned upside down and to raise a child. And so, yes, I did take that choice, and I am so grateful that it was available to me. And then, having learned the hard way from that foolish mistake, I went on birth control, and it wreaked havoc with my body and my mind. I tried various different types of contraception, and uh, all of them, in hindsight, especially now, but even at the time, had such a detrimental effect on my mental health and my psyche. It also caused me to gain weight, and there's just the inherent risks of blood clots and other medical side effects of taking the contraception. And so yet again, like, just to flip this argument on its case to prove a point here, there are male contraceptives, but they haven't been taken up widely because, I don't know, it's difficult. It's too much to expect a guy to take a pill every day. And even though there aren't consequences such as blood clots and, risk of life by taking the male contraceptive pill, the side effects such as nausea, headaches, the side effects that you get with everything, with all pharmaceuticals really, is too much to put upon the male population. And so yeah, it is left to us as the females, the girls, your mothers, sisters, loved ones, to take that responsibility. And it does affect us day to day, not just when we end up in a situation where, the likes of this recent overturning of Roe v. Wade, our rights are stripped away from us, as well as just the everyday stuff that we have to put up with. But I learned, so the kind of final example that I will share is that, having learned from that foolish mistake back in 2015, as I say, I was on contraception. And in 2020, it was the implant that I had, and it had made me put on a ton of weight. I felt like shite. And yeah, it certainly has an effect on mental health, which is something that I have struggled with anyway. But despite being having the implant, and believing that I was safe to enjoy sex without the risk of pregnancy, I was proven wrong, because yeah, despite all that, in 2020, I found myself in the situation where I was unexpectedly pregnant, didn't want to be, wasn't with somebody that I wanted to start a family with. And in fact, beyond that, as I said at the start, I come from the climate science background. I campaign for climate justice. And one of the reasons that I do that and am so passionate about this cause is because I do eventually want to settle down and have a family. But I don't believe that we live in a world right now that it is fair or possibly even right to bring a child into. I don't think it's fair on the child. I don't know that the world can deal with it. It's a world in crisis right now. So however much, like, I deeply, deeply do want to settle down and raise a family, well, not until I know that it's a world that you want to bring children into. But that's besides the point. So this final example, as I say, was on the contraceptive off the back of COVID and having been, disconnected for so long from so many. Again, it was a very casual yeah, casual, not even relationship, just a bit of fun. And having learned from my previous experience, I was on contraception. I had the implant in, and so the risk didn't even cross my mind. I guess I fell victim to the confidence that we put in contraceptives, which are not 100%. Yes, they're 99.999 whatever percent effective. But if anything else, this truth telling can, yeah, let us listen to the science and see that even within the statistics, there is still a chance of pregnancy when you are on contraception. Um, because yeah, it happened to us again. And thankfully, in this occasion, from what I understand, partly because of this happening, like whilst I was on the contraceptive or had the implant in, because of that, the pregnancy wasn't one that could be carried forward anyway. And so yeah, that wasn't, I guess, a choice per se. But don't for one second think that it was not still a horrible and, I guess, traumatic experience to go through. But those three experiences to me really highlighted that even without the effects of decisions such as the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we still have a massive issue of patriarchy. And yeah, again, the patriarchy is not just in how these things happen to us, but also in how we are able to deal with them. Like I said, like for all of them, the social conditioning or societal norms meant that I didn't feel able to share the experiences at the time and get the support perhaps that might have helped in how I was able to process these experiences emotionally. But part of sharing this is highlighting that, yeah, there's a few examples in there of um, abuse of power and the decision to be able to make a choice for my body and my life. And those are, big issues, but there's really that underlying patriarchy that means that even through that, I felt ashamed at the experiences. I felt that I wasn't able to really talk about them. I guess for fear of judgment as much as anything else. And that's where the the kind of small scale patriarchy, the stuff that we possibly don't even consider to be a problem. If you think patriarchy is something of the past, well, you're not alone. Actually, it was only this year when I read All About Love, a brilliant book by Bell Hooks, that I came to realize just how much patriarchy is rife within our society and just how much it had affected me. If you think that women's rights aren't being stripped away as we speak, or that fighting for our rights is some sort of snowflake behavior, or however you want to call it, well, please think again. It's not just women's rights that are being stripped away right now. And if you don't join in solidarity, it will be your rights that are stripped away next. History teaches us that. So, girls, we've got this. You are so much stronger than you think. And together we will win our rights to make such important choices. And boys, please just start by listening. My stories are not unique. Your mother, your sister, your loved ones all have their own versions of my stories. And we need your support. Take a look at your actions and what you can do to help, because I know that you as an individual are not to blame. I am sure that in your heart, each and every one of you cares and maybe even feels guilt, and that's okay, but don't ignore it as not to feel those feelings of guilt. I mean, join us in solidarity. This problem is a collective one, and it will only be solved when we come together. We need to change the narrative, to change our social norms, and that begins with a long, hard look within, and then talking about it with friends or whoever you are comfortable talking about it with. Have these conversations to change the narrative and change the norm. And, step up and say something if you observe even the most harmless examples of patriarchy. Because as my first example there shows, it so often begins with harmless banter. And if we don't nip it in the bud there, then that harmless banter can turn into sexual assault and somebody stealing virginity off of, a young woman, a child even. So really, whilst the kind of inspiration behind this truth telling, sharing of my stories and experiences of, a few examples of where there has been an abuse of power, or I am just so grateful. Like, I am so happy with my life right now that, I can't even imagine the what ifs if the right and the support, the opportunity for abortion, or the medical the medical support when there's a pregnancy that cannot go to term. Well, like, those are the bigger examples that are inspired by this recent overturning of Roe v. Wade, and realizing that, social justice and our rights is so connected to whether or not we can achieve climate justice and come together to act in time to save our species. But really, I guess I hope that the kind of underlying narrative of the presence of patriarchy being rife in our society, and the problems that creates, and why we need to unravel that, actually lies in those smaller social norms that are accepted patriarchy within our society. And really, until we start to take action to nip those in the bud, then perhaps we're always going to have these bigger issues. And so that's where each and every one of us can come together. We all have the capacity to change the norm, to change the narrative around this. And that starts with awareness. And like I admitted, honestly, I did not understand even what patriarchy was until I read this brilliant book, All About Love by Bell Hooks. I read that at the start of this year. It was inspired through the online magazine Atmos, and their book club. I wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. I wouldn't have even known it existed if it wasn't for my work and interest in the climate movement. So thank you, Atmos. Because yeah, not only did it teach me so much beyond, but it highlighted to me, it revealed the reality of patriarchy, how rife it is in our society, and that the first step towards taking action is awareness. And so, yeah, if you want to raise your awareness of this socially destructive issue, then I do thoroughly recommend reading the book. In fact, I have it right here because, right. So everybody, if you want to build your awareness of this or of and around this socially destructive issue, then I recommend starting by reading this book, All About Love. And beyond that, you know, once we can start to raise and share the awareness, not just of the big issues of patriarchy, those surrounding women's rights that are being stripped away right now, it's the underlying current, the fact that we let slip and see it as socially acceptable. It's social norms to kind of have these the smaller examples, the more innocent perhaps examples of patriarchy. But yeah, as I show that whilst we have an acceptance for that, we pave a path to the current situation of this Roe v. Wade overturning and just the general stripping away of women's rights. It is not just women's rights, which is why I come to you with this video, this truth telling, because ultimately, if we're not ready to come together and stand in solidarity for the rights of others, then as history has taught us, it will be your rights that are stripped away next. And yeah, like as I said, I do still, despite all of what I've been through and shared, you know, I scratch on the surface here. I do still want to settle down and raise a family, but not in the current climate. And so yeah, coming together and standing up for our rights is more than just standing up for our rights. It is fighting for our future. So yeah, whether that inspires or changes anything, I don't know, but if it gets one person talking about it, then it's worth it. So yeah, thank you for listening. And now please talk about the issue. Research it yourself, explore what patriarchy is, how it presents itself in our society. Talk about it, create those conversations that can change the world that we live in to be better for us all. And yeah, sharing stories is sharing knowledge, is sharing love. Thank you.